Okay, today this is gonna be the first episode of this little cooking thing that I'm gonna do, where I cook and record it and then share the recipe or the technique and write about it on a website, probably. And today, I guess the theme, since this is new, I should probably explain what's going on. This is plant-based cooking. So everything that I'm going to be cooking with, I feel like a magician. Everything you're going to see today is going to be done with foods that come from plants rather than animals. And today we're going to do pizza. And pizza is normally not plant-based. Pizza normally has cheese, which comes from the cow, a cow. And so we're gonna make our own cheese. We're gonna do it all from kind of scratch. I mean, it's hard to, where does scratch begin and end? It's not really totally scratch. We're starting with certain things. We're not milling our flour. We did not grow the wheat. We are even using canned tomato sauce. However, we are not buying store-bought dough. We are not buying store-bought vegan cheese, because that's always, I don't know, there's something about store-bought, like the vegan cheese you can buy in the grocery store, just has like a level of artificialness to it, and like, I'm sure it's not all artificial, but I just have that like preconceived notion, or it's very often soy-based. I don't always want soy-based as my plant-based protein source. So we are making red lentil cheese. So in this pot, we have red lentils cooking away. And this whole thing started because red lentils get really mushy. I often overcook these things. I may have already overcooked them. So I'm gonna taste right now. Let's see. It's very hot, it was just boiling, so I'm gonna do a little cheat here. Run some water over it. I'm probably gonna do everything wrong, like according to like a chef. If a chef is watching this, this is not how to be a chef. This is how I make plant-based food. So I apologize. I'm probably gonna offend people like with some of my techniques, but I'm not cooking pasta tonight, so I won't offend any Italians, even though I'm part Italian. Yep. So the lentils are nice and soft. They're probably overcooked, but that's okay. That's actually perfect because we don't care about the lentil texture because they're gonna get food processed or processed in a food processor. They are food that is getting processed. I've lived in this apartment for about a year and a half. I still have trouble finding things, so you may see me wandering around. It's not because I don't know where things are, but it also kind of is, even though I cook almost every night. So I have a hard time finding things. But eventually, I find the thing I'm looking for. Hopefully you also, like, another cool thing out of this, I'm hoping, like, I want to make cooking easy, like, look easy, because it is easy. And, like I said, I do a lot of things that are not really conventional. Like, some people would probably strain this, some people would measure out the water that was in the lentils. I didn't do any of that. I just rinsed the lentils in the pot, I just ran water over them and dumped it a few times, and then put them on the stove and boiled them just from a cold start. And that is perfect. You don't need to go through all the proper techniques if you're not a chef trying to mirror a recipe. So another thing about all this is that I kind of don't actually want you to replicate the recipe exactly. I want you to see how I am creating, so that if you don't have exactly all the same things that I have, you can at least see the process to make food. You don't need to follow a step-by-step process every time. I didn't drain this all the way. So I just leave a little gap so that my lid is my strainer. This is how I drain pretty much everything. And yeah, I know a strainer is like, it's cheap. I can have a strainer. I think we actually even do have a strainer. But this is convenient, and it works, and it makes me happy. So, if it makes you happy to use a strainer, use a strainer. By all means. This is a food processor. And that is going to turn our lentils into a cheese. And you could probably get away with a blender, I think. You could probably get away with a blender. We don't have a blender. And I'm doing something very rare. I wrote down the cheese recipe here in my little recipe book here. I may not have, actually, so I might have to... So I thought I wrote down my cheese recipe, but it doesn't look like I did. So this actually isn't going to be very useful. Oh no, here it is. So I just want to make sure I get it right, because it was so good last time. That's what I used this little book for. If I made something that I really liked, I'm going to write it down, at least the ingredients. So we got red lentils, we're going to need olive oil, and some other spices and good stuff. And I remember why I chose all this stuff, thankfully, so I can explain, you know, what's happening, why I'm doing everything. So I'm just going to dump some of these in. It's okay if there's a little bit of water. You don't want it to be too watery. You can kind of use a fork so that the water doesn't come through. Okay, so there's my lentils. And we're gonna need, so the lentils are the base for the cheese. The lentils are they're gonna give it its bulk. Make it like dense. This isn't gonna be cheese that you can like slice. It's gonna be more like a cheese sauce, which is fine for a pizza. It's not gonna be stretchy. Okay, so next up is the olive oil. So lentils are also a good protein source. It's a good plant-based protein source. So I'm gonna add olive oil to this because cheese is protein, mostly like protein and fat, I think. Because it adds fat. Because we're not gonna get fat from anywhere else. There's like 4 basic food molecules, I think. Water, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I could be wrong about that, but those are like the main food molecules. So the fatness just is gonna add like a kind of a richness to the cheese. Otherwise, it's just gonna taste like it'll be missing something. I really don't know how to word it other than that, but we're gonna want that fatness to the cheese. I like olive oil because it adds a nice flavor too. It's not like canola oil, which is like more neutral. And I'm just using extra virgin olive oil, which I also like because it's less processed than maybe like virgin olive oil or some other olive oils. So I've got my olive oil that I've added. I think I added about 3 or 4 tablespoons, maybe 5. No, I didn't add a quarter of a cup there. I don't think. Maybe a quarter of a cup. Just a little less than a quarter of a cup. I don't measure. I go by taste. So I start with the expectation that it might not be right the first time around. And you can always add more, but it's hard to take things away. So I'm going to add less oil maybe than I think I need, because I can always add more later. I just grabbed some onion powder and garlic powder. So onion powder, I'm going to put a bunch of this in here. This is going to just add some flavor. Add about a tablespoon of that. And then garlic powder as well.
How much garlic?
About the same amount as the onion powder. And you could tweak this depending on your taste if you like things garlicky, oniony. I like to use garlic and onion powder because rather than fresh garlic or fresh onion, because the fresh has a little bit more bite sometimes, it's a little bit more intense, and my food processor isn't going to process it totally smooth. So if I want something a little bit smoother, if I want a flavor that's a little bit less less harsh from the fresh onion or fresh garlic. Onion powder and garlic powder are great. I kind of resisted using them for a long time because they just seemed more processed, but really it's just dehydrated onion and garlic, so I think it's fine. I'm not a nutrition expert either. I really don't know much. I'm just kind of playing with food. So this is soy sauce. And I like to add just a little bit of soy sauce, like a teaspoon. It's just gonna add like a layer of complexity, which such weird terms, but I really don't know how else to say it. I don't know if it's true, but I know with soy sauce, and if you mix it with like mushrooms, you get a reaction that kind of, or they combine to create a more meaty umami flavor. Like it makes more glutamates, they're called. I'm gonna be adding nutritional yeast, and I haven't looked this up, but I'm kind of basing this off of, I'm wondering if I add soy sauce and nutritional yeast, which is a fungus, so like mushrooms, it's a fungus, if they combine to also create more umami, and like cheese has that umami like meatiness, like it's substantial, it feels almost meaty. So I'm gonna add a little bit of soy sauce. I don't want to add too much because I don't want it to taste like it has soy sauce in it though. Next is nutritional yeast. And I'm going to add a bunch of nutritional yeast. I'm going to add like 2 or 3 tablespoons.
And like how many lentils do you have in there? I know you didn't. I know
Maybe
you
like
don't measure, a
cup-ish of lentils. And this all might change in a minute anyways. Oh yeah, and of course salt. Cheese is salty. And there's also something else I forgot too, which I'll get to in a minute. Be very careful when you're adding salt. I always do it to taste, and I often undersalt things because you can always add more salt. In a lot of cases, cooking meat, sometimes if you add salt early, it changes like the meat itself. We're not cooking meat. It might do other things here. I add it later, sometimes too. I don't like things super salty. This is white vinegar. This adds a little bit of the tanginess that cheese can have at times, because cheese is kind of like tangy at times, right? Sometimes it's got a little funk. This white vinegar is just gonna add a little funk. It's also a good thing to thin out the cheese, so it's not like a super solid ball of lentil cheese. It definitely has a smell.
Yeah.
It's very thin right now. It's a little thinner than I expected it would come out, so I might have to add more lentils to bulk it up. But let me give it a little taste to see what we're at. Pretty good. It really does taste cheesy. Like this tastes like broccoli cheddar soup. Like, without the broccoli. Now do I add... Now I have to decide, do I want it to be this thin? Or do I want to add more lentils, bulk it up?
I say bulk it up a little bit.
Let's bulk it up a little bit. So that means I'm going to add a little bit more of everything. So, some more lentils. Except for I'm not going to add more of the liquidy stuff. Like what's it called? Soy sauce. And vinegar. That was the main thing. Okay.
I wish people could have saw your whole body dancing,
Oh.
not just your top.
It's gonna be a little thinner this time. I think I'm just gonna leave it thin. Let me see how the flavor is here.
That looks good.
It's a little. I can definitely taste it. It's thicker. Oh, I didn't add more olive oil. Does it need more olive oil though? No, I don't think it does. I really like it. That's what's fun about cooking and not having a recipe. You could just kind of wing it and see how it goes. And there's no right, there's no wrong. We've got our cheese. Cheese is done. Next is the toppings. Let's start with toppings, I guess. Okay. Oh. So, tomato sauce. We actually have, we're filming this during COVID, the pandemic. There's been some limited grocery items. Normally I buy crushed tomatoes and make my own tomato sauce from the canned crushed tomatoes, add things like basil and oregano. But they only had tomato sauce. I like tomato sauce better than like diced tomatoes or whole peeled tomatoes because it's just a little bit smoother, especially for pizza. They also add on crushed or any tomato, canned tomato that has like a structure to it, like a diced tomato or a canned whole tomato. They add calcium chloride to the sauce to help firm up those tomatoes. And I'm not saying that calcium chloride is bad for you. I don't know anything really about it other than it's used for that purpose. But I think it is at least. Again, check everything I'm saying. Don't assume everything is right. Do all the research. I just prefer less ingredients. This is made from tomato paste. It's just watered down tomato paste, which also isn't ideal because tomato paste is like just super processed cooked tomatoes. But it is really tasty and it's gonna work for our pizza. Our other topping of the day is going to be kale. So I'm gonna cook up some kale with some onions in the cast iron skillet. We have an onion somewhere. Our onions may move around. Here's one onion. That's just gonna sit there and let those flavors melt. So we got an onion and kale. I'm going to cook the kale and the onion before I put it on the pizza. The reason I am going to do that is to get the moisture out of these things so we can load it up with more veggies. We love veggies and may need to sharpen my knife soon. We love vegetables, but if you put too many raw vegetables on top of a pizza, when they cook in the oven, they will just kind of lose all their water. A lot of vegetables are mostly water, so when you cook it kind of squeezes the waters all kind of come out of the vegetables, and then you end up with a really soggy pizza crust that doesn't hold up. But if you cook all your vegetables beforehand, you get all the moisture out of them. It all evaporates during the cooking process. And you have a not so soggy pizza. And the dough is going to be fun to make. It's going to be an impromptu dough. I could show you how to make a dough without having done any prep with yeast. So I think I'm just going to do half an onion for this. Maybe I will throw some really thinly sliced onion on the pizza when it cooks, like something super thin like that. That might just be another fun little different flavor. It's gonna add maybe another little element of funness. For the kale, I'm just gonna cook in olive oil. I do almost all cooking with extra virgin olive oil. I know I've heard bad things about that, but I do it anyways. I still feel healthy and I'm here. I like it just because it seems like a It just seems like a very healthy, less processed oil. This pan is going to be heating up, because cast iron takes a little longer. Once the oil is at least a little hot, you can test it with onion. Just gonna throw my onion in there. Cut the onion as big or as small as you like it. I don't recommend cutting the onion in the pan, you might ruin the bottom of your pan. And I've got it on medium-high heat. I like to use a wooden utensil for cast iron so it doesn't scratch the pan. Now I'm going to take this kale, which has already been washed, and just shred it up. I don't really cook the stems, they're a little too fibrous. So they're great I think they'd be great for composting. We unfortunately don't compost at the moment. You can also chop the kale with a knife if you prefer that sort of a thing.
You do a lot with your hands.
I do. I love to work with my hands.
You do kind of the same thing with like broccoli as well? So you kind of just break pieces off and
yeah,
throw
for
it
the
in.
head of broccoli. I do cook the stems of broccoli though. When you cut that small enough, the stem of the broccoli is really good to cook up too. I try and use as much of the vegetables as I can. I've never seen like a good way to use kale stems though. Chard stems, like for Swiss chard or rainbow chard, you can pickle. And I have done that. I've made pickled chard stems. And those are good. They're like little crunchy bites of goodness. I felt Bob Rossi there. You got a few more of these giant leaves. Love kale.
Is there any fun facts about kale we should know?
I'm not really good. I don't know that many facts about kale. I think I heard that, by saying I think I heard, I've already said this, I basically declared that this may not be a fact. This is a good fact to check. That most of the kale that was purchased prior to like sometime in the 2000s, I think, was for salad bars. They would use it for decoration, not actually for eating. It would, like, coat all the bottom of the salad bars. It would just be the kale on the bottom. So it was more decorative for a while. And then I think it was in the 2000s when kale got like popular. I mean, I was not someone that ate vegetables growing up, really. I did not like many vegetables. I ate salad, which was like iceberg or romaine lettuce, doused in dressing, and corn on the cob, which is probably not really a vegetable. Oh no! Sometimes we make a mess in the kitchen. So the onion's kind of getting a nice brown. I like to get some browning on things. I love when food gets a little brown when you're cooking it, because that adds some flavor complexity. That's why boiled food isn't that good. It needs to get to a certain temperature to brown, and the browning actually creates a chemical reaction in the food that creates new, different flavor molecules. I think there are two different types of browning that you see. There's caramelization, and there's the Maillard reaction, and I think you're gonna have to look those up for more details. I'm not an expert, I just know those are the two things. I think the Maillard is more like a protein brownie, and the caramelization is more like a brownie with sugars in this. So it's like caramelized onions getting caramelized. They have some sugars in them. Just gonna keep that on low. While I'm doing that, I'm going to start to make the dough. So the flour I pulled out of the freezer. I keep flour in the freezer because it just keeps better there. It doesn't really negatively affect any of the doughs. I'm not a professional baker, so I'm sure there's reasons why you shouldn't freeze flour, but I do it. And I haven't had an issue. People seem to like it. I like it. Like, try not to do stuff just because it's the way you think you're supposed to do it. Do it if you like it, or if you don't like it. You might not like it if you don't do it the way you're supposed to do it, but if you try it, you might save yourself time and energy by doing things in a new way. That looks like enough flour for maybe a little bit more.
How much do you think that is?
A cup and a half, maybe? It's hard to say.
That's gonna be my guess.
You guess a cup and a half as well?
It must be a cup and a half.
So we've got the video producer, video recorder, also agreeing that this looks like a cup and a half of flour. I'm going to add water to this flour. Give this a little stir. And I'm gonna know this is done when it just looks a little bit more dry and dehydrated. I don't want to cook too much, but once things shrink down a bit, because most of that volume is a lot of that volume is water. A lot of vegetables shrink because they lose water, but the kale might just get softer because it's less fibrous now, or it's more soft. I'm going to add some water to my dough. And I rarely measure. Sometimes I measure when I bake. I often don't. I base my baking and breads and stuff based on the dough consistency. I touch it and see what it feels like. Another fun thing is, this is the most basic dough that I know how to make. And it has 2 ingredients. Well, at least so far. It's just water and flour. And if you go look at pizza dough in the grocery store that's like store-bought, it's got a bunch of other stuff added to it. And I don't know why. I think there's preservatives and other things. And I know that they might not be bad for you. They might be fine, they might be perfectly healthy, but I'm very much a minimalist with my food. I just prefer what is the bare minimum to have that would make this good. I'm also not going to knead it too much. Kneading flour helps develop gluten, which is the protein network. And gluten is what makes the dough stretchy and foam. So if you have like if I knead the dough a lot, it's going to be a really stretchy dough, really chewy dough when it's done. If I don't knead it as much, it's going to be a little bit more delicate. So I'm not going to knead the living daylights out of this thing. I'm going to knead it a little bit. It helps to knead it and develop gluten to make a thin crust because it's going to allow the dough to stretch out without tearing. That is why we use wheat flour for bread, because it can develop gluten and it can stretch, whereas flours like rice or oat flour or things like that don't have, I don't know if they don't have any gluten, but they definitely have less gluten. So they don't really stretch at all. They're just kind of a powdered substance. They don't really get air bubbles. They just turn into dense masses. And I'm just adding flour a little bit at a time to get a dough that's not sticky at all. I think my kale is done. You could see that it's a little bit, it's got some browning going on in some spots. So I'm just going to turn it off. I'm going to leave it on the heat though. Okay. So we've got almost everything we needed now. Gluten also develops more over time if you let it rest. I really encourage you to play around with dough. It's really fun. It's really a fascinating thing to play with. There's so much stuff, and there's no yeast in this because I don't want it to be a leavened dough. I don't want it to be bubbly. I want it to be a nice thin, crisp, like a cracker crust. I like thin crust pizza, and that's what this is gonna be. It's gonna be a thin crust pizza. If you wanted a thicker crust pizza, you definitely want to make a flour dough. Maybe we'll do that another evening. All right. So now I'm going to turn this into a big flat pizza. And you know what? I think I'm going to do it directly on top of the pan I'm going to cook it on. Add a little bit of oil to the base of this. This is going to make the dough a little bit crispier on the bottom. Oil makes things crispier because it can achieve a higher heat, and it transfers heat through conduction. And it's a liquid. It's a liquid, like conducting, which is that word. It kind of behaves like a solid. I don't know. It's conduction. It's not really convection because it's not really flowing. If I didn't put the oil, the bread would cook a lot slower because it's relying on radiation and convection in the oven, and the convection medium is air. And in this case, the oil is going to get hot, and that's going to transfer heat more easily than air will. So if you think about, it's a lot hotter heat gets transferred a lot easier through certain substances than other substances. So if you think about a rug, so if you ever, it's winter, like let's say it's wintertime, it's cold in the house, and you are in bare feet, and you are on a rug, and it feels fine, you don't feel cold at all, and then you go step on a tile floor. The tile is like freezing cold. You freeze your feet on the tile because it's super cold. Right? I think most people have like kind of had that experience at some point. And it's like, wait a minute, the rug and the tile are the same temperature. So why does the tile feel colder than the rug? And it's because we're feeling the rate at which heat is leaving our body. We're feeling the heat transfer. So similarly, here, or I guess I should finish with, the rug doesn't transfer heat as efficiently as tile does. So here, the oil is going to transfer heat a lot more efficiently than air, because it's a lot denser than air. It's okay if we have some holes in this. I'm not going for perfection here. You don't need to go for perfection. Most of the time in cooking, a lot of people aren't picky. Don't beat yourself up trying to make things perfect. Cooking is fun. It's food. Cooking is a great way to be active and be creative and have fun. Like, it's a great way to play. I love cooking because it's just playing. If you do want to patch these holes up, just kind of bring these together. Patch them. You don't have to go for a perfect circle either. It's okay if your pizza looks more like a blob than a circle. And if somebody cares, well, that's a shame that they're basing their appreciation for food on something so unimportant, in my opinion. Sorry, I feel like I've been kind of opinionated, and I don't want to come off like I think I know everything, because I don't. I'm just playing with food, so don't quote me, but please research what I say. Just Google it. If you're watching this, you're probably on the internet, and you can double check anything that I say. So, thank goodness we have access to so much information. You can use a rolling pin for doing this. We don't have one currently at the moment, so I just kind of pat it out. And also, you might think, like, why am I not like throwing it in the air? And that's because there's not enough gluten. I didn't knead it enough. It hasn't sat long enough. It is tearing just by doing this. That's okay. I want the pizza dough to not be super chewy, so it is going to tear apart. Olive oil, there's olive oil in it. That is going to add a little bit of tenderness to, or there's not olive oil in it, but there's olive oil around it. So maybe it might not make it that tender, but olive oil, if you add oil to bread, it's going to make it more tender, and it's going to make it stale less quickly. So that's just a fun little thing to keep in mind. I rinsed the lid of cans. I don't know. This seems like a slightly more sanitary thing to do. Okay, so when we're building pizza, first thing that goes down is going to be the sauce. And huge mistake that I see a lot of people that like that want to eat their vegetables make when they're making pizza, they add too many vegetables to the pizza or too much sauce. It will ruin the pizza. It will make it a soggy, disappointing chunk of deliciousness. So we're going to add just a little bit of sauce. For the people that want more sauce, you can have a dipping bowl when the pizza is served of the sauce. So they can add as much sauce as they want, and the pizza is nice and crispy because it didn't bake with a ton of sauce on it. So we are minimizing our sauce on this pizza. So I just like to kind of spread it with the back of a spoon. And we can just go right up to the edges. You know, we don't need a crust. Crust is just bread, so like, why not try and minimize? Like, why not just make the toppings go all the way to the end? The toppings are so good. Another thing I think we're gonna do is add some like avocado at the end, just to top on the pizza. I'm not a huge fan of avocado that's been cooked. Some people are into it. I'm not one of them. Okay, so you can see you can still basically see the dough through the sauce. I mean, I barely used any of the sauce. There's still a decent amount of sauce left. So it's gonna be great for dipping later. Next, I'm going to add our cheesy sauce. Again, I can't add too much of this. You can see it actually kind of thickened up a bit now that it's cooled down. It's a little bit more like a thick mass. Oops. The best way to kind of do this, I'm just thinking now, do I want the kale and the onions under the cheese or over the cheese. I think I'm gonna do both. I think I'm gonna lay a little like cheesy base here. And I'm gonna spread this out in a minute. It's gonna get a little messy, so just be prepared. It's not like regular cheese that you can just shred and put on nice and evenly. I'm sure you can create some sort of device to apply this more evenly, but it's all getting mixed together anyways. I'm sure there's not even a fancy device. I'm sure there's something very simple that everyone has that would do this a lot neater, that even I have that I'm not thinking of. So I encourage you to use that device, that tool, whatever it may be. Right now I'm using a spoon. We're doing this all in one shot, so you're just seeing my decisions in a moment of haste, but enjoyable haste. Again, you don't want to add too much of this cheese because it's kind of heavy. It can weigh the pizza down. While this is going, I'm just going to throw the oven on. I'm going to put it on pretty hot. I'm going to put it on 500 degrees. Like it hot so that the dough gets crispy and cooks fast. I'm using a thin pan too. That's going to, when I put it in the oven, it's going to heat really fast. If I use the cast iron pan, it would take a long time for that pan to heat up in the oven if I just throw it in cold, and you might have a bottom that's not super crispy when everything else is ready. So that's the reason I am doing that. Before I do that, there's some more things I want to add to this pizza. Mainly actually just oregano. That's going to give it a nice Italian flavor. And remember, our cheese does have a little bit of olive oil already in it. You may want to add more later, but that's a good start. And like I said, everything is under-seasoned. I didn't add any salt to the dough, so we're probably going to add some salt on it once it is cooked. I leave a salt shaker on the table. I serve food with a salt shaker because I believe that, based on just knowing, having family members that have maybe higher blood pressure that don't want to have as much salt, they can be happy with their less salty food. And then people that want more salt, more flavor, can add it as much as they want. I never grew up with salt on the table, but it's something that as a cook I learned to kind of do. That's a big chunk. We're just gonna go with it. Yeah, I think I added a lot of cheese in the beginning there, so I'm not gonna add cheese on top of this.
You really just like cook moment to moment.
Correct.
I think that can be a struggle for people that need a recipe. You know, they need that order, they need that specific amount to feel confident in what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
You use recipes. So I did learn to cook through recipes. And there are so many recipes out there. There's recipes for everything that I'm doing. That's the thing. Like, there's literally recipes for so many different things. It is insane. Like, I would Google recipe for what I think is a gross combination, and it would exist. There would be a recipe out there for it. Peanut butter and jelly omelet? That sounds disgusting, but somebody out there has a recipe for it. So I encourage, if you are really a beginning cook, do use recipes. Look up recipes. Use them as a guideline. We also have, before I almost forgot, we've got some habaneros. And I wear contacts, but anyone that touches their eyes should really, really, really wear gloves before handling peppers like this.
Thank you for adding the spice.
Of course. Get this flour out of the way. Yeah, habaneros are nice. You add a lot of spice. Again, you don't have to follow what I'm doing exactly. I know a lot of people do not like spicy. We do in this household. So we are going to add some spice. They're actually not even that spicy for us. That's the crazy thing. Like, let me see how hot this is. Yeah, like it's just habanero is great because I feel like it's the last pepper on the Scoville scale that has really good flavor before it just gets hot. Like ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, I don't really care for the flavor of those. They're just I love their heat. But flavor-wise, they're kind of disappointing. I'll add a second one too, because that really wasn't a very hot pepper. And you are noticing probably that I did not cook the habanero. They're so small. I'm putting such a small amount on here that it's not going to contribute much water to the dough. So I'm totally okay with it. I also rejected the seeds and the ribs. There is more heat in those, so if you're going for as hot as possible, I encourage you to use those. They tend to be a little bit more bitter though, so just be aware of that. Be prepared for bitterness if you put those in. But yeah, if I'm doing like a chili or a sauce with habanero, I like to add those for sure. Put the whole thing in there. I could have added them to the tomato sauce. I could have made like a homemade tomato sauce, but I'm doing this. Let's add, you know what, while we're at it, let's add a little bit of cracked black pepper. It's kind of an unconventional pizza anyways. Okay, got everything that I think I want to put on here. And I'm gonna throw it in the oven. The oven may or may not be preheated. It's okay. Like, I just am going to put it in, and we will see how long it takes to bake. You may want to be more mindful of whether the oven's preheated or not when you're baking a leavened bread like yeast, because the temperature of the oven affects how fast the dough will heat up and expand. So, for example, if I put the dough in a really hot oven, I throw it in there, and it's got yeast in it, it's going to expand pretty quickly, but the shell is also going to harden fast. So you'll get a dough that, I've seen so many different results from this actually. It's been kind of inconsistent, but it might get crispy on the outside before it has a chance to fully expand, so it might not be as airy as it could be. So what I most often do when I'm baking dough is I put it in the oven cold and then turn the oven on to high. What that does is the bread, once because it's been like kind of plopped down onto the baking sheet, it can kind of have some time to kind of expand a little bit more, because when you're making a dough, I know I'm probably going off on a tangent right now, we'll do this in another episode. When you make dough, you wait for it to rise at room temperature and the dough expands, and it's just expanding at room temperature. And then when you like put it onto a pan, it kind of compresses back down again. So what you could do, I guess, if you want the dough to get crispy faster, is let it expand on the pan and then put it in a hot oven. This is all theoretical, me thinking about this out loud. I don't do that. I just put the dough in the pan. I don't let it sit. I just throw it in there, then turn the oven on. That seems to make a good, nice, airy dough for me. Anyways, turn the oven on. I'm going to set the timer for It's not preheated yet, but I'm gonna set it for 15 minutes. I'm just gonna check on it again in 15 minutes. What I'm going to look for is a browning on the dough. I don't want it to be black. That would be cooked too much. But I don't want it to be just like a pale dough color, because then that means I didn't cook it enough. So with that, I guess I'm gonna pause the video now. It won't pause for you, but it's gonna pause in real life, and when I come back, the pizza should be close to ready or ready. "15-minute timer just went off, so I'm gonna take a look at it. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Let's see what's going on. Let's take a look at this crust underneath. It's gonna be the key thing here. It can be a little crispier, so I don't know if you saw it. There it is. So I'm gonna put it in for another 5 more minutes. But it's like almost there. I just gotta be careful. Too long. Another 5 minutes. Did I say 15? I meant 5 minutes. It's been 5 more minutes, and it is looking perfect. Let's peek on the bottom side. Yeah, that's perfect. It's a little crispy on the edges, but that's all right. So that's it. We have our pizza, and one of the most important things for this, we have our extra toppings too, because remember, we didn't want to overload our pizza because it would have prevented the crust from getting crispy, so we've got all of our vegetables, our cheese, our extra sauce, and the last thing here that I was going to say, I don't remember, the last thing is, oh yeah, the salt. We keep our salt in a jar that says cinnamon. We just buy it in bulk and put it in the cinnamon jar. But this is gonna probably need some salt because it's not gonna taste like anything. The goal with salt is not to make things taste. Let me start that over. The goal with salt is not to make things taste salty, but to bring out more flavor in what you're eating. And it's really important, especially if you are a new cook, to learn how to use salt, because if you add too much, it will taste salty and you'll get really thirsty. If you don't add enough, you'll find that your food doesn't really taste like much. Another issue that I face as a cook is I often have a hard time tasting my food when I've been in it and like cooking it all, because I just smell like there's smells and all this other stuff, and a big part of flavor is like the smell that you're getting, because taste is more like, when you think taste, our tastes are sweet, sour, umami, bitter, stuff like that, but flavor is more of like a smell thing. So when I'm like cooking, it might, I don't really smell my food. It's really strange, but if I like walk out of the house and then come back in, it's like, whoa, it smells really good in here. But I don't always do that, so my food always kind of tastes a little bit more bland to myself when I've been cooking it. But other people tell me it's okay, so we eat it, and I like it, regardless of it not maybe being super powerful and flavorful to me. So now this is here, I'm going to transfer this to a cutting board. Probably super hot. But look at that. Look at that crispiness. I can just pull the whole thing up just like that. It's got such good strength. And I'm just gonna break a little. Look at that. Nice and delicious looking. Does need salt.
It smells good.
So now there it is. This is it. This concludes the first episode of... I'll probably have a name for this by the time I post it, but for right now it's just plant-based cooking. So enjoy, have fun, make it, experiment, play with food. That's it. This is so good. I added a little bit of salt with the Salt Panda. Threw some sliced avocado on it, and it's really, really good. Crunchy. It's got a cheesy flavor. It's just perfect. It's a good one.